Many thanks go out to Lexus of Royal Oak that were kind enough to send this car my way for me to review. Well, today I'm lucky enough to have this, the IS300 all-wheel drive, and this car is the mid-range model in the IS lineup. I recently drove the IS300T, this car's little sister, and I thought it handled brilliantly in the twisties, and all around it was a really good car. But there was one fatal flaw with it: the infotainment system. Sadly, this car does have the exact same system, but crucially, you can upgrade to get Lexus's more current and more modern offering. So the question is this car any better to drive than the 200T? That answer is coming up here on the Drive Guide. Twisties, and this is where I really want to try and find the differences between this naturally aspirated V6 and the turbocharged 4-cylinder. So let's put the car into its sport mode, go into manual, and also another difference between that turbocharged engine and this naturally aspirated engine is that the turbo came with an 8-speed, this comes with a 6-speed, and the difference is in normal day-to-day. Can't really tell you a difference, but with this I find there's a little more interest from the car to shift. It still suffers the same issue though. If you were to go to red line and not shift, the car will still shift for you. That's something that always lets me down in any car I review, but the car is shifting very well. So we're currently in 6th gear. Let's drop down 3 like that. Easy done. Great pull. When you look at this 300 strictly on a numbers basis, it may seem like a bit of a disappointment. That 4-cylinder produced 241 horsepower, this produces 255. So only a 14 horsepower difference. Doesn't really seem like a lot. And then additionally, this car actually makes less pound-feet of torque than that turbocharged engine. That made 258, this makes 236. People are probably gonna just think it's less powerful. There's no point to it. But here's the difference. With that turbocharged engine, all the power came along early in the rev range. So when it came to around 4,000 RPM, the engine gave you everything it had to give. So the next 2,000, 2,500 revs were sort of emotionless. They didn't give you anything more. But with this car, it's kind of the opposite, because this engine continues to produce power when you build your way up into the rev range. So you have the desire to really rev it out. That's always been the trait of a great naturally aspirated engine. You want to take it to redline because it still has something to give. Because of that, I am having more fun in this car. It's still incredibly stable, and the all-wheel drive is certainly a help as well. It really helps you pull out of any tight situation. Even though the upgrades might not be that significant on paper, on tarmac, it really has impressed me. So now that I've learned everything here on the twisties, let's now get onto the highway to see if there's any sort of a difference there. So for every review that I've done of Lexus so far, I've said, quite honestly, very similar things. They're very solid, they're isolated, they're refined. So to think of a new way of saying it, the build quality is faultless. There isn't any loose parts, there isn't anything that rattles. It all feels so stiff and rigid. The ride is certainly on the firmer side, but it's very forgiving. It never feels harsh or punishing. You're not getting any sort of noises or vibrations from the engine and the powertrain. And the seats have the right amount of support without being restrictive. Drawbacks with the interior? Are there any? And so yeah, here on the highway, I could very easily go for a long cruise in this thing. I'm very happy to get in this car and go for a drive. So let's now see what it's like in town and if it's any different there. I said in my 200T review that the infotainment system in that car would stop me from buying that car altogether because it was the only system available. Sadly, we do have that exact same system here in this trim level for this 300. You can get the biggest screen if you upgrade to the F Sport Series 2 or the Executive Pack, and I know that whatever additional cost it may be, it's well worth it. The system is just so out of place in this car. It really is a shame it's not available on the entire range. So speaking of trim, this car is the Premium Pack, so that gets us the heated seats and the heated steering wheel, those 18-inch wheels, and with the 200T I had, that came with the F Sport Pack. So conveniently, both of those cars had the same color schemes, so if you look at this video and then look at that video, you can really see the differences in their appearance. I personally much prefer the appearance of the F Sport. Makes the car look a little more purposeful, a little more athletic. Not to say that there's anything wrong with the way this car looks. I would much prefer it with the F Sport trimmings. And the thing that I miss most about all of those F Sport packs is the LFA-inspired screen that you get for your digital dashboard. Not to say that there's anything wrong with this setup. You have these very clear, very easy to read analog dials and then a screen in the center that gives you bits of information. I do much prefer playing around with that LFA-inspired screen though. It's just something fun to do when you're bored in a traffic jam. Practicality is the same for this car as it is the 200T. I know I wouldn't be able to sit comfortably in the back of this car, but anyone under 6 foot I imagine would be fine, as the drivetrain tunnel is quite sizable. Carrying 3 abreast might be a little bit of a challenge. And then with the trunk, you've got plenty of space to put things, but I do need to note that the arms are exposed, and that's one thing that you need to be careful of if you're loading things into. You don't want those arms potentially crushing or damaging whatever it is you're carrying. I'm going to finish this review the same way that I finished up my IS300T review. I really enjoyed my time with this car, but that infotainment system that's in there would stop me from buying this specific trim of car. Again, you can upgrade to get the better and more modern system, but it's the thing that would really let me down if I had this car. Saying that, I can absolutely see the benefit to upgrading to this 300, as the all-wheel drive capability would certainly make it more desirable as a year-round car, and the way that I felt engaged to it and I wanted to keep on driving it is what really sets this car apart from its little sister. Many thanks go out to Lexus of Royal Oak, as they were so kind enough to give me this car for me to review. So that's everything from me. Thank you so much for taking the time to watching this video. I hope you can like, share and subscribe, and I hope to see you again on The Drive Guide.